Web Marketing That Works podcast, episode number 89, with today's guest, Lynette Young.
Welcome to the Web Marketing That Works podcast. Come behind the scenes of real-life marketing experiments and listen in as amazing guests confess the truth about what really works. Now, here are your hosts, Adam Franklin and Toby Jenkins.
My name's Adam Franklin, and you are listening to the Web Marketing That Works podcast. Thanks for joining me today. This is the show for people who love marketing on the web. Now, today's guest is Lynette Young, who, as you will find out more about in the show, we met at the Social Media Marketing World Conference in San Diego, and she was one of the speakers talking on this occasion about Google+. Now, Lynette has been in the online marketing world for a long time. She's been one of the pioneers, and even though I've only just discovered her, I've gone deep into some of her work, and she has been helping professionals and companies thrive on social platforms since 2006 with her own company, Purple Stripe Productions, and she's also working at Mingle Marketing as the Director of Marketing Technologies. But she's been around from before that as well, doing podcasting, and her Twitter handle is Lynette Radio, and I gather that's because she was broadcasting online before they were even called podcasts. Lynette is the author of the book Google Plus for Small Business, and she is nearly finished a new book, which we'll talk about in the show. Now, this podcast is brought to you by mine and Toby's book, which is called Web Marketing That Works, and the gift on the show is our bonus 33 free marketing templates. So if you would like to get your hands on those templates, please head to bluewiremedia.com.au/book. Okay, so let's head over to the show and enjoy the chat with Lynette Young. It's Adam Franklin here, and I am thrilled to be joined by Lynette Young. How are you?
I'm doing wonderful. How are you?
I'm very well. Now, we met recently at Social Media Marketing World in San Diego and had a great chat. And one of the things that I had been reading, or I guess watching about you, is that keynote that you did at the New Media Expo. And it was all about becoming an overnight success. And of course, it doesn't take one night to become an overnight success. And I want to dive into a little bit about that because you've got a great profile with what you do, and you've got 1.5 million followers on Google+. Can we chat a little bit about what it actually takes to be perceived as an overnight success and what really goes into it?
Sure, that'd be great. Actually, it was kind of funny because I've been speaking and attending New Media Expo since before it was actually called that, and there was a smaller conference that they had purchased up. So I've been involved in that community for a very long time. And because I had been involved for so long, one of the organizers had asked me the year before to do the keynote for them. And I asked him what he wanted. And he goes, well, talk about how you became an overnight success, like how you just showed up out of nowhere. And he kept saying all these things. And I was like, well, darn, you've known me for like 9 years. You know, I've been in this business for a really long time. Like even he perceived me as being someone that just showed up out of nowhere. And the more I got to talk to people about that, the more I realized professionally that a lot of, especially a lot of entrepreneurs have that. They put their nose to the grindstone and they work and work and work, and they wonder when the payoff is going to come. So that keynote specifically actually was derived from some mastermind and some coaching classes that I do. And then it's just kind of taken on a life ever since then. But the premise of that, Adam, was that, a lot of what we do, our day to day in whatever profession that you're in, is not easily recognized, and you don't get kudos or a pat on the back from people doing your work every single day. That I believe that you have to be out there kind of tooting your own horn and trying to get recognition for yourself and not feel, so nervous about it, I should say, and get that self-confidence where you can be proud of your work and get the attention that you need to kind of go forward. But most of what people do is the grind behind the scenes that no one really cares about. And it's not glamorous or sexy, but it's what it takes to get done, to get the accolades and to get the success and to get the business and the money and the clients later on. It's just a very lonely journey a lot of times.
And I guess putting yourself out there and trying to toot your own horn can be quite an uncomfortable place to be. How do you suggest we become more comfortable with that?
It's funny because a lot of the work that I've done, and it didn't start out this way, but I find that there is, in my own work anyway, I won't say this is true for everyone, that I find when I work with men, what it takes for them to overcome those hurdles is much different than what it takes professional women to overcome those hurdles. So obviously I'm a woman, so a lot of my perspective comes from that angle as well. But for me, it's a matter of being confident in your ability. And there's always this backlash online, especially in digital marketing or media, that no one should call themselves an expert or a guru. But I believe that there are some cases where you definitely can do that and can toot your horn. But for those of us that work alone or in small companies, it's very hard to say, I am an expert at something, or I am really good at something, or I am the best at something. But it's very easy to say we. So a lot of times when I work with people, I'll, look at those around you. No one really rises to success on their own. Look at the team around you. Look at your support system. Talk about it in those terms. And when you can come forward and saying, my team or we can do this, it's a lot easier to elevate the status and kind of brag about things than it is when you're talking about yourself, because it doesn't seem so self-serving. You're really trying to put the accolades out there for the benefit of the team. So that's kind of a good crutch that I use for people to get them used to talking about the successes in a public forum.
That's really interesting, because when we started our business, Bluewire Media, Toby and I, as founders, we were never the technical doers of the work. We weren't the web developers and the designers, which is what we started out doing. And I found it a lot easier to be the salesperson and sell our websites, because I was selling the virtues of the team. And I think I would have found it a lot more difficult and uncomfortable had I been the technician as well, and having to actually go in person and sell myself and my personal work. I can relate with that when it's not you or you're part of a bigger team, it suddenly becomes a lot easier. Like it's easier to kind of see the value that other people bring to the table than it often is to see the value that you bring yourself home.
Exactly. And it's funny because as part of the tour that I did for speaking earlier this year, where you and I got to meet in person, I was in San Francisco and Vegas and a couple other places, but I had reconnected with a professional friend of mine. And we've teamed up to actually start our own podcast, because I've been in that world for a really long time. And for me, even with that, it's much easier for me to say, we do this, or Danielle and I do this, or for me to kind of put Danielle, my partner, Danielle Smith, up on a pedestal and talk about it, where it would be really difficult to say Lynette this and Lynette that, because it's very self-serving, egotistical, and a lot of people will kind of, brush you off. If you're in a sales position, it comes off as extremely arrogant or pushy. And if you're not in a sales position, I found that it usually comes off as very, egocentric, and it's off-putting for a lot of people. It doesn't seem like the polite conversation, but, working with yourself in a team where you can get to that point where you can boost each other up is a much easier way to kind of, like I said, that overnight success of the 25 years that it took me to get where I am right now, that I can finally be comfortable talking about it, where I can jump in with Danielle and automatically be comfortable speaking about the strengths that she has and the benefits that she brings to our partnership, where I'm still kind of a little nervous on doing that for myself.
And that's interesting, because Australia is a lot more conservative, I've found, especially compared to America, in being able to toot your own horn and talk yourself up. It's sort of frowned upon down under much more so. So it's interesting to hear that even in America, it can come off as self-serving and egotistical. So at Social Media Marketing World, where we met, you were one of the speakers, and you were talking about Google+. Now, if we can just take a quick minute to talk about that, what's your take? What's the go with Google+ these days?
It's funny because part of it's been my take since the beginning, that I think that it is an extremely strong technical tool set, right? I think that the search capabilities, the photograph, all the photos, all of the video integration with YouTube, a lot of the kind of the fake, or I say faux bulletin board, or the message board type things in the communities, all of the pieces are very strong. And since the beginning, I've been kind of beating this drum that I don't believe that Google's run by a bunch of engineers. So I don't think that the whole end user experience in the community building is real. I don't think that it's not really native to them. But just the other day, I saw a snippet of a keynote that Scott Stratton had done, and he had said some number, and forgive me if the number's not right, but he was like 38 million or whatever the number was. Those are how many active people, or those are how many people every single month that still visit MySpace. And everyone was like, who the heck still goes to MySpace, right? Like you're like 12 people go there, right? But there's millions and millions and dozens of millions of people that still actively visit that site and use it as the hub of their communication monthly, right? And the same still holds true for Google Plus. It's just more niche than we had hoped that it would be. It's definitely has a niche in creatives and anything visual or anything kind of like hobby-based or activities-based communication. People will go there and rally around the things that they love to do, not necessarily the things that they love to buy, which of course marketers frown upon because we want to go where everybody wants to buy our stuff. So I think that the platform is still really strong for that. It really is heartbreaking for me, though, honestly, personally and professionally, because they did rip out a lot of the functionality that I found very useful, both professionally and personally. But it's one of those things that I think it's going to still be there and it's still going to live. It's just highly niche in its function and its use and its community. And as marketers, we're always looking for the one thing that we can do that will answer all of our questions and solve all of our problems. And that's just not sadly going to be it. Right now, everybody's still looking at Facebook. But my take on things is I'm a professional. I do marketing technology. So I'm very interested in how we can make the technology work or become seamless to let the communications in the communities flow the way that people want them to without it being really difficult for them. And that was another hang up about Google Plus as well, too. They just put the technology before the people and it got confusing for the masses. So it didn't really just take off. But I still love it. I still use it extremely actively. And it's just one of those things that sadly people poke fun at and it will become the next MySpace.
Well, it's funny, Lynette, that you should mention MySpace because I logged onto it just last week because I was trying to dig up an old photograph of when I from 12 years ago. Actually, I had this failed attempt at growing a moustache when I was living over in Greece, and I had this bandana on. It's awfully embarrassing, but I dug it up to show a friend. So I found all sorts of other interesting photos that I'd posted from back in the day. But it's funny because it's still live, it's still out there. And if anyone really wants to have a look, go and have a Google of my embarrassing photos on MySpace. But
isn't that crazy? It's like kind of like you're digging for dinosaurs. Like this is our digital footprint. Just because we're not there anymore doesn't mean that it's gone away. We just choose not to pay attention to it, but it still exists. It's very interesting.
It's still, it's like
I have to find that picture.
It's a time capsule of our digital footprint. It was it was hilarious actually looking back through some of the photos. I'm not going to delete them. I'm going to leave them there because it's funny to go back and have a look at.
Good. Now I have to go find them.
Yeah. Go ahead and have a look. So, Lynette, you've got a second book that you're writing or have finished writing or very nearly complete. It's called The Most Important Content Marketing Question Ever and the Answers.
And the answers.
Yeah. So tell us a bit about what that's all about.
Sure. Well, the first book that I wrote was Google Plus for Small Businesses, and the counterpart book for that, Google Plus for Businesses. I know those two are really original. I wrote the one for small businesses. Chris Brogan wrote the other one for regular businesses, I suppose. But my second one out is much broader. And I kind of looked back, and especially being really immersed in the entire inbound marketing movement, if you want to call it that, for some years now, I started looking back about where can I create content? Where can I answer questions easily? Like, write once, answer many, what are people asking me over and over and over again? And I literally did what I told my clients to do, which is dig through their email and see what questions people ask me on a repeated basis. And for me, I still get, how long should my Facebook post be? Not how long can it be, but how long should it be? Twitter, we know we have a character limit, but that doesn't mean that we should use them all. What are some of the best practices in that? What are some of the best practices for LinkedIn? Or now that we're talking about visual content like Pinterest or Instagram, the content there, it's one photo. Like it's not a length question, but it's a content question about what should you put in that photo? How should it be constructed? Should there be words in it? So all of these types of questions I get very often from marketers looking to make the jump from more traditional marketing to strictly digital. And when, you have that one piece of content that needs to convert on its own, everything that you publish matters and the length matters for a lot of people. Size matters. What can I say? So that's kind of what the book is built around. A lot of it is some statistics and some actual surveys collected from various sources, some like Twitter, some BuzzFeed. BuzzFeed does excellent actual research about content, headline links, email, subject lines, all of these types of things. So there's a lot of actual data out there to support some of this. And then I talk about some of the softer pieces of the marketing about how to make your content either short or long, or to find that sweet spot just for what you're particularly writing about based on your audience. Some people like to read a lot, some don't, things like that. So we kind of go through that entire process in this book.
Okay, so are there some tips that sort of apply across the board, whether it's email or LinkedIn, that you can share, or does it really depend, on the audience in every sort of situation?
Some audiences, sometimes it's age, sometimes it's demographics. I've worked a lot with a lot of B2B type companies where they always feel that they can't do fun or kitschy type content, like 17 ways to do X, or, all of these new ways that we've kind of come up with, the listicles and things like that, that they feel that they should be much more formal, much more professional. They're white paper type companies and not, Pinterest board type companies. So it does depend on that. But some clients, B2B clients, they're research and development folks, and they want big, long, boring white papers that they can print and read at home. So a lot of it does matter on the audience. But in general, I'm finding that obviously there's a lot of keywords that will wind up in email subject lines or article subject lines that either work for you or work against you. Some industries work really well when you make a negative leading statement. Like, can you believe she fell off that horse, and guess what happens next? Like when you phrase things in a negative way, people generally want to read that a little bit more than, a positive spin on things. So it does definitely matter on your audience. But a lot of the point of the book too is to kind of come up with different ways to test things, to figure out what would work better for your audience, and then how to repeat those results.
Okay. And what do you reckon marketers should be focusing on these days? Like, I guess, firstly, what should marketers who are starting out be focusing on? And then let's move through to what you think more experienced marketers should be focusing on today.
As far as the content goes in relation to the book with newer marketers, I think definitely it's a process, a discovery process that you can assume that your potential client or your market wants to read because you've looked at competitors and things like that. But I'm very strongly support the fact that I think that you should experiment from really early on. So customers or clients that want to attract people that they feel are very formal or very like what I call the LinkedIn audience. They're very like suit and tie and professional in business, shake things up a little bit and see how they respond to it, because, you can put something in there that's funny or something in there that's topical or something that is a little bit more lighthearted or not necessarily related to work. And I think that if the new marketers experiment with their content and mix it up instead of trying to become very formulaic, not only does it help them figure out what their audience will respond to the best and what they will execute on the best. So reading a piece of content is much different than acting, on a piece of content, but it also primes their audience for expecting multiple types of content and multiple formats and multiple voices kind of things, or multiple angles, where I find that it's difficult once you've established a voice or a cadence for the types of content that you put out. When you go to shift that, the change is not usually well received because you've already gotten them used to something else. So on the flip side, that's what I'll say to existing marketers. When you're used to doing things the same way, I would definitely and when I worked at an email marketing company, what I would do is I would pick say the top 5% of our customers or whoever would open our emails the most. And I would experiment on those because they were already loyal, and it would take a lot to burn those bridges down. Where people that we hadn't really converted yet, I wasn't willing to experiment on those. So to the existing marketers, I say, you can experiment, especially if you're trying to change direction or widen the types of content and the voice that you're looking to communicate in, but only pick your best people and maybe ask them, hey, we're trying something new. Would you mind letting us know what you think about it, rather than putting it out to the world, because you don't want to test with an existing audience or with an existing process.
Okay, so aside from sort of wildly changing your voice unexpectedly and scaring people off, what are some other mistakes that marketers tend to make that we could avoid?
Not changing, kind of if it works, we're going to stick with it and we're going to keep doing it. I see this a lot. And I saw this a couple of years back, specifically when Google Plus came out. Everybody was they dug their heels into the Facebook camp. And I truly believe that you should not be constrained by your own perception of what something is. If it is a communications platform and it exists online and there are potential customers out there, I think that it is worth exploring. And I see a lot of marketers they get stuck. They get in a rut, to be quite honest, and they don't want to try something new, or they'll keep doing the same thing on Facebook or keep doing the same thing on Twitter or their blog or with videos that they did 3 years ago and then get frustrated why it still doesn't work. And in this industry, I strongly believe that you evolve or you die. There's no two ways about it. You cannot keep doing the same thing. You cannot go by the same playbook year after year and expect it to keep working. So I think that's I feel that's one of the biggest problems in the entire digital marketing industry right now is this idea of inertia, of not trying anything new, of being afraid of Vine or being afraid of Periscope or Meerkat or, all of these new things that come up. They'll be like, well, when it settles down and it's a proven entity, then I'll take a look at it. I think that you should at least be watching these things and being cognizant of what's going on and watching some of the big players that have the money to experiment and seeing if there's things that you can take out of it, where a lot of people just want to put blinders on and they say, well, I'm just going to double down on Facebook and spend some more money on ads and kind of ignore everything else.
So especially if you're like an early adopter, then you need to be testing out these new platforms and evolving, as you say. So aside from actually experimenting yourself, who have you learnt from over the years in terms of keeping up to date with everything content and everything social media?
It's kind of funny because, now they're popular, but I would definitely consider myself an early adopter. That is one thing I will toot my horn on all the time. I am in stuff is before it breaks, right? Like I need to know about things before it hits the market, before anything, because I need to bang on things with a wrench and see how it works. It's just kind of how I'm wired. But Gary Vaynerchuk has long been I don't want to say he's long been a favorite of mine. In the beginning, his whole the way he presents himself kind of rubbed on me the wrong way, but I live in the same state that he lives in. And I actually met him when he was 12 years old. He was exactly the same as he is right now. He's a total hustler. But I like the fact that he doesn't come from traditional marketing or traditional media. He has a real grassroots in the trenches experience with running a family business. And I can definitely relate to that. So I like to watch people like him that come up in this industry that don't come from Madison Avenue in New York City, ad agencies and things like that. We've done it this way because we've always done it that way, sort of thing. I want people that try things that are new, that make a lot of mistakes, that fail fast, that fail often. Those are the type of people that I look at. Chris Brogan is actually another really good example, in my opinion, because he comes from telecom, I think is what he came from. And he doesn't come from a marketing background or a business development background. He comes from the background of actually doing the work, failing, and figuring out the better way to do it. And that's kind of really what I'm a fan of, about the honesty of experimenting in a new agency or in a new environment.
Just on that issue of honesty, it's often very confronting to be honest and transparent online, yet also the more vulnerable you can be, the more people get to know, like, and trust you, which of course leads to a stronger relationship. And how do you advise your clients or friends, or in your own experience, to strike that, or to overcome that fear of actually being vulnerable and revealing some stuff that may not be the polished press release style image that you want to portray, but actually, becoming confident to actually reveal a bit more about yourself?
Right. Well, one thing, it's funny because I've done quite extensive work, would be considered mom bloggers and women bloggers with a lot of household type lifestyle brands in the United States. Not so much anymore. I've kind of switched a little bit over to B2B, but that industry specifically taught me a lot about transparency, about these bloggers that were looking to come up and work with, Disney or Johnson & Johnson or whomever they were trying to work with to make a little bit of money and trying to come up as professionals. This idea of transparency to them, to some, I should say, but specifically in that environment, seemed to kind of bleed out to the rest of the world or professionals, that transparency somehow equaled everything. And just because you're transparent doesn't mean you're disclosing everything. You don't have to tell your financials online. You don't have to tell every little failure that you have. You don't have to disclose every single little thing about your business. But what I do think specifically companies and brands should do is sit down and identify and outline the things that they do want to be transparent about. And I'm not saying hide things or lie, but really you don't owe anyone on the internet every single little detail about your business, right? But the things that you do talk about, I think that you should be honest about. So by outlining that ahead of time and getting almost a manifesto together about the things that you will say and about how honest and how forthright you are willing to come in a public forum and get that out ahead of time. It's almost cathartic where you can kind of get that out of your system so that when you actually have to say these things online or write content or answer questions, you're not having to make those decisions right then and there. You've already come to those decisions. You're already kind of at peace with this. A lot of times you'll come across more public relations type stuff. But when you have a negative incident online, like how should you react? What is your process? What is the workflow to deal with, apologies and, trying to rectify situations? And I believe that it's the same for transparent and a positive method online too, is determine what you are comfortable with talking about and then talk about it as much and openly as you possibly can. But that doesn't mean you have to disclose everything because transparency is not full disclosure.
That's a very nice framework because I like how you have already done the sort of hard thinking about where your boundaries are before you actually go and then talk about it. So that peace of mind of actually knowing, what you will talk about and what you won't. That's really neat.
Yeah, because if you get called on something or asked something publicly and you have to take a week to kind of hash it by everyone in the office or legal or whomever you have to talk to, that week turnaround time is the kiss of death online. You need to be able to answer them, in my opinion, within a full business day. Or whatever it seems likely and reasonable in that industry. But usually I'm seeing a 24-hour turnaround time is not unexpected. And that's about the threshold when people start getting antsy that you didn't answer or they start escalating it on their Twitter stream or something like that. So if you have these answers and you already know that you're comfortable with this, you don't have to go and shop that around to see what you're comfortable with disclosing online and how transparent you're willing to be, because those decisions are made, which allows you to react and communicate much more quickly, which in turn builds trust and transparency.
And I guess with more and more real-time communications like Periscope and Meerkat and even, podcast isn't live and people are listening to recordings, but people are being asked the question live. And if they then stumble and go, I'll get back to you on that, or dodge the question, then I guess that does raise questions as to their trustworthiness and everything else. So really, really neat framework there, Lynette. We've certainly covered a lot on this podcast. Have you got any final words of wisdom or anything you'd like to get off your chest before we call it a day?
Anything I'm going to get off my chest? I don't know. The drum that I've been beating for a really long time, the more that I work with companies and the more that I work with marketers is don't be afraid to try new things. The worst that can happen, you're not going to break the internet. You're generally not going to break your company, but be honest about things that you're experimenting with and just try new things. Look for other people as examples, because if you're, especially outside of your own business or ecosystem, I very rarely look at my own industry for examples. I look for other industries and I get examples and I use them as mentors because I don't want to repeat things that are already been done in my industry. Try to kind of look outside and get a different perspective for things.
And finally, Lynette, how can people connect with you or find out more about what you're up to?
Well, you can find me on Twitter at Lynette Radio, or LynetteYoung.com is my professional site. And I'm working right now at Mingle Marketing, which is minglemarketing.com. And we're an inbound HubSpot Gold agency, which I'm really proud of. So we're doing tons of work over there, which you could definitely hunt me down and find me there.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much. And I look forward to crossing paths with you again at a future conference. And thanks so much for joining us on the show today.
Thank you.
And that's a wrap for my interview with Lynette Young. Really cool, that last thing we spoke about, having that framework for vulnerability and transparency and working out where your boundaries are before you're hit up with those questions, either live or on social media or whatever. And I think that will probably provide a lot of comfort to especially business marketers working at a larger corporation where they've had a history of doing traditional marketing and traditional PR, where you've had a lot more control over the message and a lot more ability to polish what you share. And this new transparent online world is very scary for certainly for people that I've been involved with in corporate land. And Lynette's framework there of working that out strategically, what it is you talk about, what it is that you don't, and then I guess also understanding what those stories are and how deep you go on a handful of topics to really demonstrate that transparency. So really cool interview there with Lynette. I'm always learning new stuff on these podcasts, and I hope you are too. My intent is to deliver actionable advice. And this podcast was brought to you by mine and Toby's book called Web Marketing That Works. And the special gift for you is the 33 free marketing templates that go with it. So you can get your hands on those at bluewiremedia.com.au/book. I'm always open to feedback. I appreciate it. You can always drop me an email, adam.franklin@bluewiremedia.com.au, or tweet me at Franklin_Adam. If you've enjoyed the show, and I hope you did, I'd love it if you could take 60 seconds to leave us a review on iTunes. And I look forward to speaking with you in the next show. See you.